Hey, welcome on into the Midnight Book Club, everybody. Tonight we're in for a treat because not only are we joined by my cat, but we're also going to be reading from some classics tonight. And that is first and foremost Strange Creatures from Time and Space, the classic of weird zoology, cryptozoology, weird research, encounters, whatever you want to call it, by John A. Keel. If you don't know, John A. Keel is one of the grandfathers of the weird, of studying the weird, ufology, aliens, parapsychology, however you want to put it. He was at the forefront of it way back in the 60s. This handsome devil right here. Now, what's cool about him, what I like Keel as a researcher, is because he was the first one to connect UFO sightings with poltergeists, ghost activity, lights in the sky. Well, UFO sightings is lights in the sky, but entities and like beyond. So he was the first one to really connect someone seeing lights in the sky with people in that same area experiencing ghost encounters like poltergeists, or having really strange dreams, or encountering odd people like the Grinning Man, who is also in Fallout 76, where we'll be reading from tonight. But just weird stuff like that. If you've joined me in Midnight Book Clubs past, we have read about the Grinning Man. There's a whole chapter about him in here. That's not what we're reading about tonight. Tonight we are reading, well, the chapter is called, let me just start there. He likes to be cheeky with his chapters. This one's called The Big Joke from Outer Space. Now, it's called that because a lot of these sightings, a lot of these encounters, they're going to be funny. They're going to be a little zany with like the people that they are said to encounter. We're going to go from like beings in like golden jumpsuits to more sinister and scary type of classic gray aliens. So buckle up. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a wild ride. This is where we're starting tonight with Strange Creatures from Time and Space. Look at that beautiful cover, by the way. The intrepid cryptozoologist versus the unknown. Kind of like us tonight, huh? Why we read. So we're going to jump into that in just a second. But first, we got to go to where we're reading from, and that is the wasteland in Fallout 76. We're out here in my little shack. I love reading out here in Fallout 76 because every now and then a friendly so-and-so drops by and wants to hear a tale. The mic is hot, so the wasteland can hear me. You could mute me, or you could come join me for a tale of the unknown and possibly share a tale of your own. I like reading from here, not only because I get to be right outside virtually Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the great Mothman was sighted, but also you can get a visit from Mothman, the Grinning Man, and even the Flatwoods Monster. There's lots of cool, I think the Slobbernost, gosh, what's it called? There's lots of cool nods. I'm forgetting all of them, but there's really cool nods to cryptozoology in this game. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And of course, as I read tonight, if any of these stories about the unknown knock something loose in you or make you want to share a terrifying paranormal or not so terrifying paranormal encounter of your own, or a family story, whatever it is, I would love to hear it, because as always,
we're ready to believe you.
We're ready to believe. So let me hear them tales. Let's get into our own strange tales for tonight. Fair warning, these are mostly from the 60s, so they're older tales. That's when this book was published. I like to collect books about weird shit, and most of the best weird ones are from this time period. And now now I gotta talk about this. In this same time period, in the 60s, when old Keel here was tromping around doing his thing, there were tons of sightings in Ohio. Now, I know that's like the joke, right? That's like the meme. Oh, Ohio, so weird, Elden Ring. But seriously, though, in the 60s and the 70s, there was a shit ton of weird stuff popping off down there. You got melon heads, Grassman, Bigfoot, the Charles Mills Lake Monster, Bessie, freaking the werewolf of Defiance. That I have yet to find a good story about. I'm searching I'm looking. I really want to find a good story about the werewolf of Defiance to read because I love modern day werewolf sightings. Then you got Octoman, the Mud Mermaids, and then the classic Mothman. Mothman, that's who's connected to Keel. Keel was the #1 researcher for Mothman. That's whose book we're reading tonight. We're not reading about Mothman, but he also collected stories about strange encounters of the type that are on this map as well. But I'm getting off track. Ohio in the 60s and 70s was a freaking lightning rod for the weird. Now, I don't know if there was maybe a portal open there. Things were the veil was a little more thin, so creatures from other dimensions were popping in to say hello. Like, look, oh, the Loveland Frogman. Sorry, I get distracted. Loveland Frogman, one of my favorites. We've read about them many times in the past. Look them up. Little frog guys with sparkling wands. They're great. Anywho, Ohio, really weird in the 60s and 70s. Our guy Keel was out there researching. We're going to learn about some of those encounters tonight, as well as other encounters around the United States. But I just like to talk about that because there's something to that meme. There really was some weird shit going on in Ohio back in the day. Mothman included. All right. Space Jokers from Outer Space. Or the Big Joke from Outer Space. I was like debating reading this chapter tonight until I saw the first line of it. 2 police officers in Gaffney, South Carolina, had a brief and not very informative chat with a little man in a tight-fitting gold suit early on the morning of November 17th, 1966. They didn't know it, but scores of other apparently sober and reliable people have been reporting identical experiences for many years. These little men are important part of flying saucer lore. They have also been the butt of many jokes ever since the New Yorker published a cartoon some years back depicting a little man from a flying saucer addressing a horse in a field. Take me to your leader. That makes me think about the Cosmic Joker chapter in another great book we have. It's an Encyclopedia of the Unexplained. This couple meets a very weird, strange little man in a diner who seems to speak to them telepathically and is very angry about what the UFOs they saw on the road. And then they get chased by a UFO afterwards. It's a fucking awesome story. But the United States Air Force apparently received a rash of little men reports in the early 1950s. For in 1955, Captain Robert White, then Pentagon spokesman for the official UFO chasing project, Project Blue Book, told the press, "In the past 3 years, I've heard all kinds of descriptions of UFO knots. I love UFO knots is one of my favorite words for aliens. UFO knots, baby, like astronauts. But anywho, but most of frequent are little green, luminous, smelly types. Despite all the stories, I'm still convinced that no spacemen have landed on Earth. Still, people keep insisting that they've seen little green men. South America seems to have been inundated with little green men in recent years. A 15-year-old boy named Alberto San Roman Nuez told police in Lima, Peru, that he had been on the roof of his home taking in the wash on August 1st, 1965, when a saucer-like thing landed near him and discharged a 3 1.5 foot tall being who had greenish lights on his skin that made him look like a frog. Terrified, Alberto ran for the stairs. As he did, a red light from the object enveloped him for a moment, and then it flew away, heading for the ocean. Police later found 4 circular marks, each a foot in diameter, on the roof. Another rooftop landing, also in Lima, also, like, what the fuck? Freaking tie from now, the present, to the past. Whoa, timeline tie on history. Lima, Peru, crazy alien shit happening, same as it ever was. That's still going on today. There's always reports. Well, it seems like reports from South America are also still frequent. I love those kind of connections. And then recently, where was that? The people, was that in Peru? Oh, that small town was being terrorized by the entities that people were seeing. Anywho, I love it. Connection, party time. Whoop 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 whoop. History connection. Oh shit. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that to my camera, folks. Got a little excited there. Okay. Calm down. Another rooftop landing, also in Lima, occurred on August 24th, 1965, when 20 students and their adult teachers heard some strange sounds on top of their school. They went to the roof and discovered a throbbing disc-shaped object, which took off as they all ran for cover. There have been many landings and sightings around schools all over the world. The sensational, much publicized sighting in Hillsdale, Michigan in 1966 took place directly in front of a dormitory on a college campus, and hundreds of children, teachers, and nearby adult residents saw circular, seemingly metallic objects hovering low over the Crestview Elementary School in Miami, Florida on April 6, 1967. From all the reports, it is painfully obvious that the UFOs and their strange occupants have a special and perhaps unsavory interest in children. Oh no! Oh no, John A. Keel, what are you proposing? Not the children. On October 4th, 1965, 3 hysterical children charged into the office of the headmaster of the Liberator General San Martin School in Salta, Argentina. Dang, Liberator General. Sounds like a gnarly friggin' school. And told him that several short, ugly, greenish monsters had attacked them and tried to catch them while they were walking to school. The story was nothing new to the headmaster. He told reporters he had heard the same sort of thing before, about 2 years earlier. What? Okay, that reminds. Okay, we might have to do that. You know, I was debating tonight. Do I want to read about fairy sightings that have happened through history? Because this is very close to a fairy sighting that happened in Jolly Old back in the day. School children being harassed by tiny people-like things, throwing rocks at them and shit. Just interesting parallels. It's funny the headmaster's all casual about it. Like, yeah, that happens. Little green people try and steal our students sometimes. No big whoop. There are now hundreds of cases in which the UFO knots have reportedly spoken to witnesses in the local language and have even made bids for publicity. Okay. Argentine shopkeeper Felipe Martinez claimed that 3 separate encounters with a little man, a yard high, who wore a driver's costume and a helmet and spoke Portuguese slowly with difficulty. That is always... Oh, why do I have chills talking about this? But anywho, that's always a sign in these stories. The entity speaks slow and deliberately, but it's communicating in English. It's like the Grinning Man. For those of you who do not know the story of the Grinning Man, out here in West Virginia in the 60s, a man was driving home late at night and he saw this light land in front of him. And out from the light climbs this man in a suit, the man you see in front of you right here. Has a big ass grin on his face from ear to ear. The man reaches his hand out and it's like, "Hey, I'm Ingrid Cold. Nice to meet you," pretty much. And it's like, "I'll be back." And that's all the encounter is, and the guy flies away. But that is the Grinning Man story. And then several other people in the same area saw this dude and saw lights as well. But very similar to these little stories here they're describing of lights and then meeting a UFO knot. The Grinning Man is just a more terrifying UFO knot. But anywho, and when Ingrid Cold spoke, it was really slow and deliberate. Just like when people have the scary Men in Black encounters, and I'm not talking about the fun, like Men in Black in movies. It's like the Men in Black that might or might not be interdimensional entities or some sort of thing. They talk like that as well, in the stories at least. What's what people claim. Anywho, a guy in a driver's costume and a helmet spoke Portuguese slowly with difficulty. Martinez said that they asked him to help him gain recognition, but he told them all he can do is report the meeting to a radio station. Later, after another alleged meeting, he said he was taken aboard a flying saucer with 4 crewmen, all less than a meter in height. That's less than 39 inches. With a 5th occupant was a blonde man about 6 feet tall. Another weird coinky dink that happens in a lot of these UFO stories, a lot of these encounters that people have. They encounter these tiny beings and then tall ass blonde beings. On that occasion, he said the crewman put a spacesuit on him, but it caused his heart to pump so rapidly that he had to take it off. This was in 1965. On August 14th, 1965, João de Rio, a railway worker, was fishing on the river Paraíba near the village of Cruzeiros in Brazil when a saucer-like object landed nearby and a tiny man, 70 centimeters high, 28 inches, with big luminous eyes, addressed him in perfect Portuguese. He said he was from another world and authorized Rio to tell him whoever he pleased, then handed the astonished fisherman a small metal disc. He said he would return and hopped back into his saucer and flew off, just like Ingrid said he would return. The young witness reportedly turned the disc over to the authorities for analysis, and that's the last we ever heard of that. Yeah, folks, okay? If you're given a gift from beyond, don't turn it over to authorities. Don't we learn anything from fiction? Anywho. Interesting though, the disc. That's like when we read the Andreessen affair, which is another terrifying UFO encounter that happened to Betty Andreessen and her family. She was abducted one night. Her daughter encountered entities, and her father did as well. They were all frozen as she was abducted and taken on board a ship. She was given apparently like a little like glowing book or something. I wonder if she still has it. I don't know if that was ever something that was recovered. Another piece of metal, this one bearing a peculiar inscription, was apparently dropped in front of 2 students near the Mexican Polytechnic Institute in Mexico City, Mexico, on August 19th, 1965. The students, Diego and Payo Rodriguez, said that at 8:30 a.m. that morning, a luminous dome disc landed on tripod legs near them, and 2 small creatures about 80 centimeters, about 31 inches, tall and wearing gas masks, got out, dropped a metal plate in front of them, and flew off again. Investigators found the grass was burned and the alleged landing site, and there were marks where the tripod legs had rested. Drops of strange fluid were also found. Similar fluid has been found at many other UFO landing sites. It consists of alumina and silicon, both mundane earthly substances. The metal plate was turned over to the laboratory of the National Polytechnic Institute, and nothing further was said about it. Ooh, a classic story as old as time. Nothing further was said about it. Flying saucer flaps, and that's John A. Keel likes to call when there's a shitload of saucer sightings of saucer flap. So saucer flaps have occurred repeatedly around reservoirs, lakes, and rivers, indicating perhaps that water plays an important role in the UFO mystery. For example, hundreds of people saw all kinds of mysterious aerial objects around Wenatchee, New Jersey reservoir in 1966. A fisherman named Jose Alves of Pontal, Brazil, identified as a hardworking, quiet man who has never heard of flying saucers before his experience, said that he saw 3 little dark-skinned men get out of a flying object on November 4th, 1954. And one of them filled a shiny metal tube with water from the river Pardo. Numerous tribes in western United States and Canada have legends about little men who come to specific lakes and rivers for water year after year. These places have been avoided by the Native Americans and regarded as sacred. In Mexico, there are extensive legends about the Huachos, little people who visited Mexican streams and lakes in the distant past, walking underwater in glittering diving suits. What the fuck? I've never heard of those legends. That's so cool. So that, wow, interesting. And that reminds me, there's a really great, if you're looking to believe, there's a really great Unsolved Mysteries. One of the new, they re-released it on Netflix or whatever. It's not as good without Robert Stack, of course, but they do a nice homage to him at the end of every episode, which I appreciate. Anywho, there's a really good episode in like season 2 about this, where people in Michigan saw this UFO go over the lake and just suck water up. I think water and gold, I feel like, of all my like things I've read and shit I watch, I feel like water and gold. I mean, not that I know anything, but water and gold seem to be important to entities. The Irish have always told of us of little men in tight-fitting green or brown costumes who frequent lakes and rivers on the old sod. While most of us tend to dismiss the leprechaun lore of Ireland as folktales and myth, there are a number of impressive and well-documented books, we got one of them, relating to the numerous appearances of these tiny elusive beings. In many of these accounts, the witnesses allegedly encountered leprechauns on the banks of a stream or a lake, where they were filling a receptacle with water. Like most of our UFO knots, the leprechaun is supposed to be skittish and flees from human beings. And also, like our UFO knots and monsters, the leprechauns are supposed to be capable of leaping great distances and disappearing into thin air. In Sweden and Denmark, we hear about trolls, gnome-like beings who live in the earth and who have physically deformed. The leprechauns are supposed to live underground too, and woe to anyone who tries to find their hiding places. From time to time, they are said to kidnap children and whisk them away forever. In UFO lore, we have the Deros, or detrimental robots, who are supposed to live underground in secret caves or even in the hollowed out center of the earth. What? What is, that sounds like something from a show, the Deros. I've never heard of that. Oh no, Keel. Variations on this underground dweller theme can be found in ancient legends going back thousands of years. Well, that's true. There's like all sorts of tales about ant people, people that helped us out, who lived underground and helped us out in times of need way back in the day. All sorts of ancient tales like that. Not all the little people mythology is baseless. Archaeological evidence of sort does exist. The ruins of ancient cities in South America have been found honeycombed with tiny tunnels, staircases, and passageways so small that normal men have to traverse them on their hands and knees. Who built these things and why? Even in the United States, in New Salem, New Hampshire, not far from Exeter, site of a UFO flap in 1965, there is an ancient construction of tunnels and tiny chambers built long before the Native Americans arrived. They say that little men constructed the place. Another elaborate system of tiny tunnels lies outside of Cusco, Peru, home to many intense saucer flaps. A large number of people reported seeing two luminous dwarves get out of a disc near Cusco on August 20th, 1965, and the lieutenant governor of Santa Barbara, Peru, solemnly declared that he encountered two tiny humanoids walking in the snows near Lake Kelakocha on September 12th, 1965. They disappeared, he said, in the midst of a deafening noise. This unfathomable ability to vanish instantly into thin air is described in many reports. During the August 1965 flap, 6 witnesses in Grand Forks, North Dakota, said they saw a blinking, transparent, circular object resting on a golf course and that it contained little figures inside, moving like silhouette. When some of the witnesses ran towards the object, it disappeared with a loud bang. It just blew up, one of them observed. Another transparent object have been seen many times over the years. On August 28, 1962, 3 people encountered a brightly lit object on the ground 300 yards from the National Highway number 2 near the city of Dolores, Argentina. It was, they said, about 30 feet long and 15 feet high, and there were human-like figures moving about inside the machine. There were nighttime sightings. These were nighttime sightings. Suppose these same objects flew over your house during the day. Would you be able to see them at all? Great question, John. The human eye can be compared to the radio receiver. It is tuned to detect only a very small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, the middle range of the electromagnetic waves known as visible light. Thus, any wave tuned to a frequency above or below the range is invisible to the naked eye. The evidence indicates that the occult and UFO activities are largely conducted in those frequencies beyond the human perception. Man-made instruments such as radar are tuned to those higher unseen frequencies and can occasionally intercept objects unseen by the human eye. Back on it. At least one contactee has been told that flying saucers are normally invisible to us. The witness, Gary Wilcox, was a hardworking young man alone on a 300-acre farm outside of Newark Valley, New York, around 10 a.m. On Friday, April 24th, 1964, Mr. Wilcox was out spreading fertilizer when he saw a flash of light, like a mirror reflection, and discovered an egg-shaped object hovering a few feet off the ground nearby. It was, he said, about 20 feet long and 12 to 15 feet wide with rounded ends. Puzzled, he walked over to it and touched it. It was like touching an automobile, he later told investigators. There was a sound like a motor idling. Suddenly, two small figures dropped to the ground from the underside of the object. Although they were human in shape, they were only about 4 feet tall, both were encased in a silvery one-piece suits. Their heads and faces were also covered by the same opaque material, and they were holding trays on which they appeared to have soil samples. Their hands were out of sight under these trays. Hell yeah, you touched the egg tag. Me too, good buddy, and welcome on in. Don't be afraid, Wilcox was told by one of them. He spoke in a deep voice that seemed to come from his chest rather than his head. We have talked to people before. They were somewhat surprised that he could see them, Wilcox reported, and they told him that their craft was normally invisible at a distance beyond 100 feet. Furthermore, they did most of their work in the daytime because their vehicles were harder to see then. At night, they said, their craft tended to glow in the dark and betray their positions. Wilcox, a sober, well-educated, articulate young man, dutifully reported his story to the local sheriff and signed a sworn statement on May 1st, 1964. We have a copy of that statement in our files. In it, Wilcox stated that the UFO nauts had told him that astronauts John Glenn, Virgil Grissom, and 2 Soviet cosmonauts would die within a year due to exposure from space. This prophecy was not too precise. John Glenn slipped in his bathtub and damaged his inner ear, which affected his sense of balance for several months. Coincidentally, Yuri Gagarin, Russia's first man into space, suffered an identical accident around the same time. In January 1965, well, I'm glad that nothing happened to him. In January 1965, Virgil Grissom was among the 3 astronauts who died in a disastrous fire aboard Apollo space capsule undergoing testing. 4 months later, on April 24th, 1967, exactly 3 years after Wilcox's encounter, Russian cosmonaut Colonel Vladimir Kosmarov died when his space capsule crashed. Gagarin was killed a year later in a plane crash. Wilcox said that the little men talked to him for about 2 hours, discussing many things that were beyond his comprehension. They warned him, he said, that it would be in his best interest not to talk to anybody about the incident. When they finally got back to the object, it glided upward a short distance and then suddenly seemed to vanish. A reddish jelly-like substance remained behind on the ground. Wilcox said he couldn't seem to get a hold of it with his hands to pick it up. It melted away in a day or so. Dr. Berthold E. Schwartz, a leading psychiatrist, visited Wilcox in 1968 and carefully examined him. There was no evidence for any undue preoccupations, trends of thought, pathological thinking, or inappropriate effect, Dr. Schwartz later noted in his report in the Flying Saucer Review. Yeah, and that's how it goes, right? These guys get studied, and it turns out nothing is wrong with them. They actually encountered what the fuck they were talking about. It's just too hard for any of us to believe it. That's basically what happens with Dr. Mack, right? Harvard-trained psychiatrist, doesn't believe really in any of this, and then all of a sudden he interviews people There's nothing wrong with any of them. They're not pathological. They don't have whatever that doctor was talking about. They're just good, honest folk that encountered something that are to be believed. Oh, let me back up a little bit. So the UFO not stratagem. That's what we're talking about now is UFO not stratagems. Not stratagems and hell divers, but kind of the same thing. What these UFO knots or space visitors, aliens, whatever you want to call them, like to do is drop in and have chats with us. And that we're reading from Strange Creatures from Time and Space, a classic from John A. Keel. His chapter on the big joke from outer space. So all the little like weird encounters people have. Betty Andreessen's encounter. Yeah, definitely big hearts for the Keel man. Betty Andreessen's encounter would definitely be considered one of these, but sure, that happened later on in the 70s, right? So it's not in the book. But same deal, where she's taken on board a ship and they have a chat with her. They're like, yo, shit's kind of fucked up on your planet, but it's cool. We're giving you this information that you don't know now, but you're gonna have it. You're gonna know what to do when the time comes. So yeah, that's a UFO not stratagem. They're varied and seemingly pointless. Sometimes they threaten a witness, sometimes they pass along prophecies which later come true, and sometimes they just seem to drop in for a meaningless chat with whatever Earthman happens to be handy. 2 police officers in South Carolina participated in one of these chats back in 1966. Their story appeared in only a single local newspaper, and months later it was briefly mentioned in the pages of Fate magazine. In that account, 2 men described the little man as having a greenish complexion. Had 2 police officers really seen a little green man? In November of 1967, we finally had the opportunity to find out. We gave a lecture in Atlanta, Georgia, and then rented a car and drove to Gaffney, South Carolina to chase the story down. John A. Keel on the beat. Patrolman Charles Hutchins, one of the witnesses, turned out to be an ebullient man, stocky, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, in his early 30s. He regarded us with some suspicion at first, asking for assurance that we were not with the government. Like most of the country, he had heard of the well-publicized tragedy of the Ohio police officer Dale Spar, who had lost his job and suffered all kinds of unpleasantness after being involved in a celebrated Ohio UFO chase of April 1966. We adjourned to an empty room. Ohio, once again, Ohio strikes again. We adjourned to an empty room in the police station, and he began with a confession. The little man had not had a green complexion, and as was reported in the newspaper, he said. When he and Officer A.G. Husky had first told their story, they had been subjugated to many jeers that they impishly added the green complexion. Actually, he admitted, the creature's face seemed to rather ordinary and human-like, and neither man was able to tell whether his complexion was light or dark. Interesting. Details like that get added because people are getting like ridiculed and made fun of. But why make it more ridiculous? Hutchins had been on the Gaffney police force for about 6 months at the time, and Husky had been a policeman for 5 years. Sometime after 4 a.m. on the morning of November 17, 1966, the 2 men were making a routine patrol along the isolated and unpopulated road through an outlying section of Gaffney, known as the West Buford Street extension. When, as they neared the right angle bend on the road, they suddenly saw a metallic object directly in front of them. This object was descending when they first saw it, Hutchins said, and was about 20 feet above the ground. He described it as being spherical, like a ball, with a wide flat rim around it. There were no lights or portholes visible on it. It was completely dark, reflecting a dull gold color. In the headlights of the police car, their car did not stall. As the object settled within a few feet of the ground, both men got out of their car in a state of bemused amazement. Later, Hutchins estimated that the object must have been about 20 feet in diameter. A small door suddenly opened noiselessly on the underside of the sphere, he said, and a short ladder, 4 to 6 feet long, dropped down. White light poured out of the opening, but neither man could see anything in the interior. A figure appeared in the doorway, descended the ladder, and walked slowly and deliberately toward the two police officers. When the figure reached a point of about 15 or 20 feet from the two men, it stopped. He didn't move stiffly, Officer Hutchinson told us. He moved like anybody else, but kind of slow, like he was taking his time, like Randy Orton when he comes down the walkway. Oh, big, if if you're listening right now, Randy Orton tonight and the King and Queen of the Ring outdid himself as far as taking his sweet time coming down to the ring, and it was awesome. So this little alien guy's walking just like Randy Orton, taking his sweet time, soaking it in. He wasn't scared of us or anything like that. In appearance, he was about the size of a 12-year-old boy, maybe 4 feet. He wore no helmet or headgear and was dressed in a gold suit with no buttons or zippers. His costume was shiny like metal in the reflection of the headlights. It was not self-luminous. We were both kind of shaky and scared, Hutchins admitted frankly, so he did most of the talking. When we asked questions, he wouldn't answer us, but he just went right on talking. Oh, that's so? That's the like that happens in every abduction too, right? They get abducted, and you start asking the aliens questions, and they're just like, "Hey, shut up. This is what we're doing. Just listen." And then you're just like taken along. Hutchins could not remember seeing the feet of the creature. It was standing on high grass, and the feet must have been hidden. Unfortunately, our interview took place a full year after the incident, and both men had understandably forgotten small details. They could not even remember the full context of the quote-unquote conversation. He talked real good, like a college graduate, Hutchinson claimed. Didn't have any accent or anything. He acted like he knew exactly what he was saying and doing. He didn't make any quick moves or false moves. He just stood there and talked to us. What exactly was said? Officer Hutchins recalls that he stammered out a question like, "What are you doing here?" And the creature didn't reply, but asked a question of his own. He wanted to know why we were both dressed alike, Hutchinson said. So I guess we told him we were police officers. Oh, that is fucking precious. Why are you two guys dressed alike? Well, it's like, well, why the fuck are you guys dressed alike? But you got all you little space aliens in the same little suit. His speech was very, very precise. He pronounced each word carefully. I can't remember everything he said now, but it wasn't anything very important. I asked him where he was from, and he didn't answer. He just laughed. He had a funny kind of laugh. The confrontation was brief, perhaps only 2 or 3 minutes. Then Hutchinson said the creature announced, "I will return in 2 days." Very much like Ingrid Cold, the grinning man. Same encounter with the guy in the car. He just like shakes his hand. He's like, "What up, guy? I'm Ingrid Cold. I'm from a place that's not Earth." And the guy's like, "Okay." And then Ingrid's like, "I'll be back." And then he just gets back in his saucer and flies away, just like this guy. He turned, walked slowly back to the ladder, and climbed into the object. The door closed quietly, and the craft began to whir. It wasn't like those whirring sounds in science fiction movies. There was no screeching to it, Hutchins observed. It was soft like an engine with a muffler on it. The object rose slowly and vanished into the sky. The two policemen said they stood there for a few minutes in stunned silence before they finally pulled themselves together and returned to the police station. They went back to the site the next day with a local councilman named Hill and found several fresh footprints in the exact spot where the little man had stood. They looked like children's footprints, Hutchinson said. No casts were made. Hutchins appeared to be a straightforward, honest witness. There were many details he could not remember, and it seemed he did not attempt to embellish his story at all. His reputation in Gaffney is excellent. Careful cross-examination failed to uncover any discrepancies in his narrative. Later, we spoke to AG Husky on the phone. We did not meet him. He confirmed Hutchinson's story and said he wanted to forget the whole thing. That's what most people, I feel like legit encounterers are like, I just never want to talk about this shit ever again. So please stop asking me about it. He had left the force and now operates his own business in Gaffney, a town of about 10,000. Neither Hutchins or Husky had read any UFO literature before the incident, nor do they seem very interested in such literature now. They were not aware of the numerous other far-flung contactee stories in which the witnesses also reported that the UFO nauts declared they would return at a specific time, as a number of South American cases cited earlier. Our funny creatures also seem to be dispersed among and even interchangeable with our more bizarre monsters. When they are not hanging around atom bomb factories and garage dumps like Mothman, they are sniffing around oil wells and refineries, even in the heart of cities. One puzzling creature reported, which seems to be a mixture of many things, took place in Erie, Pennsylvania, 1966. So let's buckle up. We're winding down our book club for tonight. We have a couple more pages left in this beautiful chapter. We're going to learn about a creature from Erie, Indiana. Great show, by the way. That haunted a city, which I love. I love that. Usually, the closest we get is a Mothman. Mothman, not really haunting the city, the outskirts and the TNT, factories of West Virginia, and not really entering the city. So I'm really excited to learn about a city monster. Oh, so let's dive in. That instant coffee, though, right?
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
On the night of July 31st, 1966, a glowing object chose to land on a deserted beach in Presque Isle Park, Erie, Pennsylvania. While five young people in a car stuck in the sand a few hundred feet away watched. After it landed, the object projected strange beams of light into the nearby woods. Then a tall, dark figure shuffled up to the car and terrified the witnesses, leaving a scratch on the roof of the vehicle. The next day, quantities of silicon were found at the landing site, along with some peculiar cone-like indentations in the sand. The Presque Isle police vouched for the witnesses and said that they were sincerely frightened. Scores of other people in Erie reported seeing unusual aerial lights that same night. Another connection of lights and a creature, a Mothman. Not Mothman, it wasn't flying, but big scary guy, like a Bigfoot-like creature. Bigfoot, interdimensional traveler, ancient being, I don't know. When we went to Erie to investigate this case, we found a curious note in the police files. A woman had called them to report another monster sighting. This one was on West 3rd Street, facing Erie Harbor, and directly across from Presque Isle. The woman, Miss Julie Hillwig, told us that she was awakened by barking dogs at 5:30 a.m. on the morning of Wednesday, August 3rd, 1966. And when she looked out of the window, she saw a human-shaped being about 5 feet 6 inches tall. It was clothed, she said, in a yellow jacket. What? And yellow trousers with no discernible pockets, belts, or other features. Total weirdo. The head, she said, was huge and moon-shaped, and when seen from the side and back appeared to be flat. This head was covered with straggly brown hair, in a muddy color. What? The creature had big shoulders and a slender build. It moved with a stiff, jerky mechanical motion, holding its arms close to its side. The arms did not move at all. Its legs did not bend at the knees. He moved, she said, like a mechanical wind-up toy. Local dogs were barking at its heels, but it ignored them. What the fuck? And it's dressed in yellow? The sight of this creature frightened her, and she woke up her husband. He looked out the window, but since he was not wearing his glasses, he only saw something moving. The creature appeared across the United Oil storage tank on the West 3rd Street and walked stiffly out of view. That's why I sleep with my glasses on completely. I sleep with my glasses on and my eyes open, suspended by ropes, standing up. So no matter what, if something fucking moves, I'm gonna see it. Ain't no ghost or ghoulies getting by me at night. Another woman in the area saw a similar creature that same week. This woman, who wants to remain anonymous, said she was driving down 3rd Street late at night when she saw the creature. She stopped her car, it came up to her car, and pounded on the hood, then moved off into the darkness. Well, there you go, lady. There's your lesson. When you see a creature, don't just stop your car. Maybe slow down a tiny bit and keep going. I loved it just came up and was like, bonk, bonk. Fuck you, lady, then went off into the woods. Like so many other witnesses to the unbelievable. Mrs. Hellwig felt very alone because no one took her story seriously. She had never heard of any similar stories herself. Now she knows that she has plenty of company. Yeah, she does. And as always, Mrs. Hellwig, don't you fret. We are here to believe.
We're ready to believe you.
Who or what are all those assorted spacemen, monsters, beasts, and boogeymen? It does look as if some of them, perhaps all of them, hitch rides aboard flying saucers. If so, do they all come from a single place? Or are we being invaded by 100 different groups from 100 different unknown places? I mean, if this stuff is true, the answer has got to be like far more like insane and complex than we could even comprehend, I feel like. Or at least I could even comprehend. I don't know. That's just like that John Mack quote. All he found out from studying the alien abduction phenomena was that the universe we live in is far more weird, far more complex, and far more filled with like entities and things that we have no concept of, no idea about. But yeah, that's how I feel. I don't think it's like an invasion or anything. I just think it's things we don't understand at all. Do all these characters know each other? Could it be that they are working in unison to accomplish their goals, whatever their goals may be? In one little publicized incident, the footprints of both giants and dwarfs were found together in the vicinity of a single UFO touchdown. It happened on December 24th, 1960, outside of Durango, Colorado. On that Christmas Eve, over a dozen witnesses saw a huge, intensely lighted object swing down from the sky and disappear, Santa, duh, among the trees on a nearby peak. At the top of it, you could definitely see a circle or dome. Wade Folsom later told the Durango Herald, and every foot or so apart were lights. I wouldn't call them windows because they didn't look at like ordinary windows. They seemed to revolve or flop over one row after the other. The next day, the Folsom's pet dog just dashed out of the house and in a state of terror and died at their feet. No, that always happens to the pups. Like Mothman, one of the first dudes to have a Mothman encounter back in '66. It landed outside of his house and he ran inside and his dog went out and like had like an encounter with it and took off running and he never saw his dog again. And the Momo is a killer of dogs. This motherfucker right here, the Momo. Arkansas, seen with several bloody dog carcasses. Watch your canines out there, folks. These paranormal creatures are hunting them down, apparently. Anywho, the next day, the pet dog ran out of the house and died at their feet in terror. Members of the family went up the mountainside and discovered an area where overhanging tree limbs had broken off. They found a vast number of footprints, unlike anything they had seen in the mountains before. Undersheriff Myron DeMore and Deputy Bill Heiser later visited the site and reported that one of the sets of prints were definitely human, even though they were 15 inches long, and they were accompanied by another human-like footprint only 5 inches in length. These tracks led to a deserted mountain cabin, circled around it, and returned to the touchdown site. Imagine being asleep in that cabin. Those people are circling it. A dog belonging to a neighbor of the Folsoms reportedly disappeared on the night of the sighting and was never seen again. Could it be that this little man and the giants were preparing to gang up on us? Nah. But no, that's where it ends. Basically, he goes on to talk about his theory about what this all may be. We'll get into that because it's classic Keel. He's more of a kind of, but this was back then, kind of a invasion head. If that, we'll get into it. Could it be that the little men and the giants are preparing to gang up on us? We have made a grave but human mistake in trying to lump all these things together in a simple framework of assuming, for our peace of mind, that the unidentified flying objects are visitants from another planet, here merely to survey us before establishing contact. If all this is the work of a superior intelligence from somewhere out there, it is infinitely more complicated than the UFO buffs have dreamed of. I mean, amen. I agree with you there, Keel. The deeper you plunge into this subject, the more complex it becomes. True. One answer raises 100 more questions. Many of the objects and their occupants are openly hostile to us and have proven this case after case. Almost all the thousands of reports prove that they are conducting a vast program here as secretly as possible. Perhaps they occasionally plant monsters in a UFO flap areas and stage absurd events to reinforce our skepticism and disbelief. Are they buying time with our stupidity? Buying time for an invasion? Now, all of this whole chapter makes me think about Werner von Braun. Now, why it makes me think about Werner von Braun, let me see if I have a picture of Mr. Braun. This whole chapter makes me think of Werner von Braun, especially the end, when Mr. Keel here at the end is waxing philosophically about, oh, why are we seeing all these things at the same time? Are they all connected? Are they trying to gang up on us? He falls more into the camp of what Dr. Mack says, which is it's not as simple as like they're just like invading us or watching us or anything like that. This is way more complex than we're ever going to understand. It's connected to all these sorts of different paranormal activities, if you will. So Keel's like, it's way more complex than we'll ever get. And why that makes me think of old von Braun here is because on his deathbed, apparently, he confessed that if there was ever an alien invasion, it would be a fake alien invasion, a Phalian invasion, if you will. It would be governments masquerading as aliens in order to, whatever, like the classic trope of a comic book ending in Watchmen, where it's to get countries together to make a one world government type of deal, or it's to, get other countries in line, whatever they want to do. According to Werner von Braun, if there is an alien invasion, like a hostile alien invasion, that's the government doing it. He was the dude who got us into space. One of the dudes, he of course credits Parsons, but he was another one of the dudes who got us into space. Former Nazi rocket scientist who ended up working for us after World War II. Interesting guy. I just think it's worth noting that that's what he said on his deathbed. And that makes me think of the hostile creatures John A. Keel talks about. Now, if you're to believe any of the stories that old Dr. Greer tells, and he has some pretty wild tales from some of his whistleblower folks, then anything that happens that's like evil is a program being like not evil. It's a better word for it. All the hostile things that happen, like really scary abductions, that is all a program, like a government program that where they're abducting us, doing experiments, whatever it is. Or it's like people working with entities. So that's what, if you're going to walk with what someone like Dr. Greer says, that's what the hostile shit is. But that's what that chapter makes me think of. Wild stuff. If you enjoyed it, check out more of John A. Keel's research and theories. It's really interesting. That's the Midnight Book Club for tonight, folks. Thank you for joining me. We read a chapter of Strange Creatures from Time and Space. The chapter was called The Big Joke from Outer Space. So take that as you will. We walked through a lot of strange encounters with little beings, big beings, and everything in between. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next Saturday. We're going to continue walking through the weird. This chapter that we read about the little aliens, the encounters people had with creatures that were coming out of tiny spacecrafts and having conversations with them, made me want to read about the history of fairies. So next week, we are going to put Strange Creatures from Time and Space away, and we're going to revisit this bad boy right here, the new edition of Unexplained. Strange sightings, incredible occurrences, and puzzling physical phenomena. Now, we're going to read about the history of fairies in this book, and it's a really good one. I mean, I know for me, same thing. I was like, fairies, like why would that wet my whistle at all? But I'm telling you, it does. People have had wild encounters with strange folk throughout history, and it still happens to this day. But now we just code it as like alien encounters. So thanks for joining us on the Midnight Book Club. Look, sorry, my camera's weird because look who's here today. Look who's here today, and we're gonna say, this is a rare treat. So we're gonna bother her and say hi. Tilt up. Oh, that's all the zoom I can give you. Okay, well, today we're joined by Mewtwo, my kitty. Rare treat that you're up here, huh? This is typically her bed during the day, not at night. But anywho, thanks for joining me for the Midnight Book Club. Love you all. If you want to stick around, I'll be hell diving with my best buds, so that's always a good time. That's what we're getting into next. Enjoy your night. Have a beautiful rest of your night, whatever you're doing. Have a good Sunday, Monday, Memorial Day, wahoo. But yeah. All right, let's hell dive. Oh, yeah. All right, I'm locking in. Locking and loaded. I'm going to switch my little thingamadig over here. Oh, yeah, okay, let me see here. Oh. Oh, are we jumping right in? Oh, hell yeah. I think we might just join, let me see here. Are you is your Whisper of Morning in orbit? I'm going to use the restroom real quick and then jump on. All right, BRB folks. Enjoy the view of my cat.